Legacy, that is week 3 in the book, so we're going to do a recap before we get on to week 4. You're going to hear me complain a little bit about how quarterbacking isn't a position anymore. Now, the kickers came back down to earth, which makes life a little bit more normal, and if you got the running backs, then maybe you got the horses to actually win this thing. We also, within our league, had an interesting matchup, a team that actually could have been pushing 200 if their bench wasn't pushing some of that weight, unfortunately. We also had another one come down to about 2.5 points. So lots to talk about. Let's get to an NFL Week 3 recap and then on to our scores. Just the fact that I'm even using the old man Patterson with the finger on the button reference does suggest I myself am old, because I remember when The Simpsons were one of the best shows on TV and super funny and relevant, and I've been told that's probably not the case anymore. But anyway, this is a very old man point today, not one that I am alone in making, but one that you can probably hear on many other outlets. In our fantasy world and in our football world, I think the story still is the fact that we don't have many, if any, great quarterbacks right now. I actually did get in a conversation amongst a few people at work who probably consider themselves young-ish about how great it was back in the day when we had the Mannings and the Bradys and the Breezes and the Rodgers, and we listed off effortlessly about 5 more quarterbacks and saying how great it was to have so many prolific offenses. And now if you're actually watching a lot of football, it's a little bit simplistic, but I do have to think that I walked into this week with an age-old question of, is David Carr actually good, or are the rest of the quarterbacks that bad? Then, of course, week 3 hit, and David Carr does what he does, which is he takes himself out of that particular question by just playing horrible. But it does kind of raise that idea. We have a lot of these mid-range but slightly older and experienced quarterbacks that are looking fantastic, even though we know there's this crop of new quarterbacks who actually are discernibly better, but they don't know how to run an offensive system. But I think we do have to look at not just blame here. It used to be, again, you're going to hear that a couple more times, my oldness coming out, but you used to have to wait a couple years as a backup quarterback to learn a system, and then eventually you inherited the program. Now we're throwing in first and second year rookies and just being shocked when they're not doing well because they're on garbage teams. You got to remember, the NFL is just that American version of socialism, where you can only have a socialist structure and system if you balance it with uber capitalism, and that indeed is the NFL. Unlike football or soccer or whatever one offends you least, they can buy their players at a young age, they can keep them and trade them as they like, and essentially kind of own them without having to draft them. But we know in the football, not the case. The worst teams get the best players, often don't have a line to back them up. So like Chicago, instead of investing in their line, they invested in receivers because they want an immediate, quick, fancy, and fun offense, even though they actually can't block for either their quarterback or their running back right now. And they're not alone in this. I think if you're watching any of these young quarterbacks, it's a bit scary because you have defenses that are either being hella aggressive because the defensive coordinators are really clever, or they're dropping back. And realistically, these quarterbacks have never really learned a lot of these check down passes because they haven't had to. So they're not really able to make them. The kind of football does promote a little bit of a different style structure, and I'm sure there's another brilliant offensive coordinator out there that's going to change things and use some of these quarterbacks. But I do kind of feel for them a little bit, and this isn't just my rant on the lack of ideas. It is really just because I've watched a few of the young quarterbacks because I have some of them on my teams. Jaden Daniels is probably the perfect example of this. I mean, 2 of his first 3 games, he was able to actually have his team never have to punt, nor did they turn the ball over, and that's good. In fact, the Cincinnati, Cleveland did nothing good. Cincinnati and Washington game, both teams kind of had that. Again, that's really good. But if you looked at some of the things he had to do to extend some of those drives, involved using his feet a lot, again, can be good. But he got hit so heavily and so hard when he did it sometimes that it looked shocking that he got back up, and that's bad. So essentially now, if you're a young quarterback, you just have to try and last long enough to maybe be okay and actually understand what you're doing. And then you get compared to some of these other old time. Bryce Young getting pulled and then Andy Dalton going in is probably just the easiest example that we all saw. And Dalton comes in on an offensive line that's supposed to be horrible, throws for over 303 touchdowns in a pretty electric outing. Now, granted, The defense might not have been phenomenal, so we'll see if he can keep it up. But someone like Sam Darnold, that was considered a wash, is actually looking great in Minnesota. And this is only a little after Baker Mayfield kind of had his resurgence after him seemingly flaming out. And if we think that, this is just a flash in the pan and Sam Darnold is just maybe having a couple good weeks, that's possible. He's also not the aged veteran you think of. He's only 27 years old. He's actually the same age as Joe Burrow. I think he's actually a couple months younger. So it's likely that he could be what he is right now until he turns into Kirk Cousins. Speaking of which, Kirk Cousins wasn't great when he first started, and he kind of slowly learned the system. And now he's barely able to stand up in Atlanta, and he still looks like a super functional quarterback. It's except for when he has to move and stuff. So what we end up getting on the fantasy end of things is extremely erratic scores, especially on the receiver end. For tight ends, Dallas Goedert comes out and has a week, and he's already the tight end 1 on the year after one good week. Juwan Jennings comes out and has a monster week. And then even in actual NFL standings and statistics, he's 3rd in receiving yards. But depending on your scoring system, he's a 2nd or 3rd best wide receiver, with in some cases a rookie being number 1 and a rookie quarterback being number 2, because all you need is 1 or 2 good weeks out of 3. Obviously that would be nice, but in some cases just 1 good week and you're fine. I think right now, if you, and you're going to hear it later when we go into the leagues, if you actually have a tight end who's scoring any points, well, you don't, because none of them are doing it in any kind of a consistent rate. So what does this end up being? Again, I think we're looking old school here, or I'm feeling very old school fantasy. And this is old school fantasy, not old school streaking through the quad and into the gymnasium. Running backs seem to be the only kind of source of stability that most of these good teams actually have. Now, I mean good teams as in fantasy teams, and also good teams in actual real teams. If we look at the 5-3-0 teams, Kansas City, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, you've got Minnesota, and you got Seattle. Now, not all of them have phenomenal runners, but they do have a commitment to running for the most part, at least until, Pacheco went out, but they still gave the ball a little more consistently. Versus our 0-3, we've got Cincinnati, Tennessee, and Jacksonville, who've had nothing but instability. Could just be a fluke, could be a flash in the pan, who knows? Let's be honest, it's only 3 weeks. There's no preseason anymore, so maybe now the preseason's over. Can we start having fun watching football again in week 4? Speaking of week 4, we are going to jump, before we talk about that, onto what happened in all of our leagues in week 3. I will just mention, I think we got one more week before the buys start. I think week 5 is when the buys actually get kicked off. So just bear that in mind as you're making your lineup. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's cut to our leagues and how we fared in fantasy. Always a shame when the second highest scorer going against the highest score. Well, a shame for them, not really for the rest of us. But sorry, Max, when this one just kind of hurts. Taking a quick look at Gene the Machine here. So he did end up having the quarterback 4 in Burrow, and that performance came a little bit late. I don't know if other people were following this, but this matchup definitely came down to Monday night in a very, very big way. And Burrow going against a defense, that was a perfect game. Neither team punted. We also had Chase in the same game, so a double whammy on that one, which I know a lot of people do enjoy. And then Washington can't seem to stop anyone. Chase was the wide receiver 2. Aside from that as well, Barkley being the running back 1 and definitely kind of running away, no puns intended, with that kind of the race here. For Maxon, when you lose this close, there's not that many points that are in between you, 15. You did have the quarterback 5, so good for you on that one. And then you just had some strong and steady performances, except for these 2 bagels. Your defense was the best defense that anyone started. Once again, pumping down on another team here with Buffalo. I faced that wrath last week, and I got to do it, buddy. I'm sorry. I got to show bench players. You know what's coming here. And there it is. Our tight end 1 by far. Someone in Chuba that was a running back 4 might have made a nice flex. You can do the math quickly because it's replacing 2 zeros. That sucks, buddy. Who would have known Andrews and Shaheed in any other given week, in any other circumstance, but it was what it was. Fortunately for you, scoring a lot of points is going to be good in this one because you even jumped up in rankings, because we are going to have a tight league in terms of wins and losses, so the points scored will at least help you out there. And Gene, man, you held on again. The undefeated streak continues. Our champion from last year, undefeated, top seed now. Let's see if can anyone stop him moving forward. I think I've said this in previous videos, but I am getting used to the kind of Sunday vibe here, and you can wake up a little bit early and put a game on. You get the afternoon games at like 3 in the morning and 4 in the morning, and kind of slowly wakes you up. And then you want to see, like, watching your matchups in fantasy. Is that going to wake you up? Well, it kind of sucks when you turn it on and you're already getting tub thumped so badly that you might as well just roll over. Lucky for me, I'm in a gazillion leagues. I just stopped paying into this one right away. Rennie, you took it to me hard. I didn't even get to enjoy the Monday night Daniels performance. He was our quarterback 3 and kind of one of my lone shining lights. I guess you could include Seattle, but if a defense is your shining light that I've since cut, they were the defense 4. Everybody else, I mean, I'm happy with what Shakir's doing. Yay. For you, Rennie, kind of a death by a million paper cuts, although Williams was the running back 3 and just a freaking awesome game to actually watch. The rest you just kind of picked away. When you have this many in the plus 20, plus 15, you're going to be doing all right. You didn't really necessarily need any other standout performances. Now, you did have McLovin on the bench, and Eckler, I guess, is going to be a bit of a problem going forward. He is concussion protocol, and Herbert, we're unsure. But you didn't need them last week, and I'm not even making reference to Mr. Jones because he wouldn't have won me one anyway. So congratulations on the 150. Congratulations on getting the W. And as I said before, points scored are going to matter a whole bunch because you took the W, and then you jumped a bunch of spots. So good for you. You actually jumped me. I was going to call you a name, but I'm just so proud, buddy. Well done. Great week. Well, you didn't quite hit predicteds, but you didn't really need to because Marco definitely didn't hit predicteds. You can kind of go matchup by matchup, and you both had your highs and your lows. No one really went off, except you can go down here for our QB1, just barely nudging out Allen, which matters because in some league scorings, Dax was number 2, so obviously pay attention to our particular scoring. But you just kind of outmuscled him on every turn here. Marco, you kind of fell flat. Laporta's health concerns were obviously something you got to look into. New Orleans came back down to earth, so that didn't really help you out. You do have some bench options. And what do you know? Your wide receivers did just fine. I mean, Worthy wasn't... can I keep making the Worthy and Chubb jokes with you? Yes, I can. He was not worthy of a start, and you did have some people that could have replaced him here, but you didn't need it. Like I said, you didn't quite hit your predicteds, but you definitely hit the W, and you're in our top 3. Congrats. Predicted schmerdicted, because Connor was supposed to come in and have his way with Dibbler, but he said no bueno in a 2.5 differential matchup. Jeff takes it, stays undefeated, stays right on Gene's heels. Now, looking, it's not like he went off, but he just did what he was supposed to. If you look at the people on his team, I don't think there is one. In fact, I know there wasn't one that went top 5 and in their position, except for our boy Neighbors here, who did kind of step up. He was the wide receiver 4 and a gutsy play at running or wide receiver. I mean, he's talented, but that offense, You did have Jake Ferguson on the bench, who probably would have helped you out, as he was our tight end 3. But you didn't need it because Connor really didn't have anyone crack except for Allen. So, I think I mentioned before, quarterback 2, quarterback 1 in most scorings, but he had a great outing and maybe made the Monday nighter a little bit more stressful. But you did have our wide receiver 5 on the bench. That would have been helpful. And certainly Rodgers probably would have helped you out instead of Hurts, but that would have been a gutsy call. So ifs and buts, we can go back and forth. Some people hit their performance. Some people just went under. And at the end of the day, Jeff, you're 3-0. Connor, you're fighting with the rest of us at this 1-2. Someone not fighting with the rest of us at 1-2. Tamer, you got your second win, so congratulations there. Taking a look, Taylor and Rice were kind of your studs. Taylor was the running back 5. Rice, the wide receiver 3. And super sneaky Cooper here was actually the wide receiver 6, just out of our top 5. And that was kind of enough almost on its own. Kent's just having a rough year. There's a joke to be made here. His wins and O's, since he got married, saving all his O's for after. I'm not going to make it, but you know it's there. Anyway, it would be nice if Mr. Rushke could actually put one together and get a W, but this week was not going to be that week. Now, Henry did try and help you out as best he could. You also did have some lovable tight ends. I mean, Henry was our running back too, and if you take a look at the bench, to have a tight end who actually scored anything is always good, but then Kincaid was the tight end 5. And you could have traded. I mean, there's some people here, like your opponent, that need a tight end or playing ones that aren't even playing. But you got to be happy for your Hotown boy. Dunze actually went off, so that was a good one. He wasn't in our top 5, but just because he's a Chicago native, you got to give him a little bit of love. And Caleb obviously had his best game thus far. So outside of fantasy football, you must have been happy. Inside of fantasy football, didn't quite step up. You're really going to need that win. But we live to play another week. We'll see how it goes. And Timmer, like I said, you're one of the few people in this league with 2 wins, so I'd take it. I keep making reference to it, so we might as well just take a quick look. 2 teams undefeated, 1 team without a win, 2 teams with 2 wins, and the rest of us fighting for see how many points we can score and how that might apply. So that usually leads to tight matchups. Let's see what that translates to. I am getting one of the undefeated people, and I'm supposed to be Tub Thump, so let's see how that works. Rennie, you're actually getting the other undefeated, and you're actually supposed to be quite competitive, so you look like you might have a slightly better matchup here. In terms of the rest, can Rushke actually go through? Well, he's going to be facing a Connor who's slid here, and definitely is putting up a lot of points, but not getting the wins he's accustomed to. We got a nice little college football rivalry here in Woody and Maxon, and then a 2-1, 1-2. So if you actually look at it, as weird as it is, with all the 1 and 2 teams, none of them are playing each other next week. So what that means, I don't know. Yahoo's got some kind of voodoo on us, but either way, should be makings for some good matchups. There you have it, Legacy. I told you it was a good week. A bunch of things came down to narrow margins. Now we got a ton of ties, and we got to sort them out. So let's look to week 4 to do it. Right after this video-ish, you should have the Cowboys and the Giants on your Thursday nighter. Then it's a normal week, and we double down on the Mondays again. So not really sure what that's going to bring us, but I do know that week 4 brings us 0 buys. By week 5, we can't say that anymore. So enjoy it while it lasts. Best of luck, crew.